Sonic Advance games are one of the most praised games in the series, but are they really as good as people say they are, or is it all just nostalgia speaking? Well, today I'm going over every single Sonic Advance game and comparing the review scores to how good they really are. Sonic Advance actually got pretty high ratings across the board. It got an 8 out of 10 from Nintendo Life, a 9.1 out of 10 from IGN, and it's currently rated 87% with a user score of 7.9 on Metacritic. But why is this? Well, I feel like the main focus of Sonic Advance was the novelty of having another 2D Sonic game, and in that sense, it seems they executed it pretty well. This thing is actually packed with a lot more references than I thought, with music, bosses, and other nods to the original Genesis games. It's basically a less extreme version of Sonic Pocket Adventure, which was practically one big homage to the classic. But something that I thought was kind of cool was that it also takes inspiration from the 3D games. The most obvious one is giving everyone their modern designs, but I also like the integration of the grind rails here. Actually, that's a lie, I don't. Yeah, the biggest issue I have with this game is definitely the level design. You can definitely tell Dimps was getting used to designing levels for the Sonic series with this game, because the way they implement difficulty is pretty cheap. Oftentimes, the level just loop around where you already were, simply because you took the obvious path over the obscure one, and it can get a little gear grinding after a bit. I'm looking at you, Egg Rocket Zone. There's also a lot of instances of enemies popping up right in front of you when you couldn't see them coming, and how could I forget? The legendary Dimps bottomless pits. The legends didn't lie. But obviously, those critiques are more of a result of the low resolution of the game, and less of the level design itself. Well, probably also the level design itself. Now, I'm not a Chow Garden guy by any means, but this game actually has a really cute little tiny version, where you can play different mini-games to feed your Chow. You can even choose to just play the game itself and get rings that way, which is really cool in my opinion, and works much better than the whole rod thing in SA2. You can also name them anything you want. It's perfect. I know it's kind of a given, but the music's actually really good here, way better than I remember. This game even pulls off the credits theme well, and if I purposely beat the game to listen to your credits theme, I think you've done a good job with the music. Overall, I kinda like this game. While the enemy placement and boss design can be a bit cheap at times, I still think this was a great little game to waste your time on, especially with that tiny Chow Garden. I'd say this game is only like ever so slightly overrated. I'd give it about a 7 out of 10. Alright, I played enough Ultimate Flash Sonic to know where this is going. Sonic Advance 2. Now, this game actually has a slightly lower rating than the first game, getting an 8.2 out of 10 from GameSpot, a 9 out of 10 from IGN, and an 83% with a user score of 7.8 on Metacritic. So basically, it's about the same quality as the first game, if not slightly worse, right? Well, not really, because this game fixes one of the biggest issues I had with the original. And that is the level design. I was pleasantly surprised by just how good these stages really are. This game manages to put you in a sort of flow state with its level design incredibly well. I was expecting to go into this getting stuck on Sky Canyon and then just sort of getting too frustrated to keep playing, but no, I was actually addicted to this thing. Especially the levels that people often complain about. They were actually a lot of fun. And sure, there may be a few cheap enemies and bottomless pits here and there, but that really only motivated me to replay the game and actually get good at it, unlike the previous game. Which is why it's such a shame that they dropped the tiny Chow Garden here. It was such a neat addition in the original, but I didn't really catch myself coming back to it because I didn't care as much for the stages to actually replay them there. But here, I would totally go back and spend some time grinding the levels for my Chow, but I can't. Actually, I figured out there is a tiny Chow Garden, but it's unlocked by collecting all the Chaos Emeralds, so really, there isn't one. While the boss fights in the original were just sort of meh, here they're a lot more exciting. I was shocked by how much my Ultimate Flash Sonic muscle memory kicked in here, because I surprisingly had no problem beating some of these. I may or may not have gotten a few game overs at the boss rush though. They're definitely an improvement over the original game, but they can get a little repetitive after a while. Though if you really don't want to go through these, you can always just set your game to easy mode, and they'll only have half of their HP. No, there isn't a specific reason I know this. As for the music, though, I think it's slightly weaker here. While Advance 2 has higher highs, it also has lower lows. They fit the stages well enough, but Advance is just a bit more consistent, in my opinion. Overall, Advance 2 is a massive step above the first game, which isn't immediately apparent by comparing the review scores alone. Though Sonic Advance being the first Advance game obviously gave it the advantage of novelty, so it would have generally gotten slightly higher review scores anyway. I'd say this game is pretty fairly rated though, if not slightly underrated by the community. But the community is Sonic fans, and we can't agree on anything. Including what we think about Sonic Advance 3. Either love this game and think it's the best in the series, or absolutely hate it. There's no in-between. Though reviews tend to favor this one, getting an 8.4 out of 10 from GameSpot, a 9 out of 10 by IGN, and a 79 with a user score of 8.1 on Metacritic. So is it really as good as people say, or as bad as people say? Well, I actually have a pretty strong opinion on this game. Let's start with the positives, because these graphics are really good. These are some pretty creative level themes, Toy Kingdom, Sunset Hill, and Twinkle Snow being my favorites. The backgrounds are also detailed and have pretty cool ripple effects, like the water in Route 99 Ocean Base, as well as the northern lights of Twinkle Snow. The music is great as well. There's a good amount of tracks that really get stuck in my head, even after I turned the game off. There is also a handful of forgettable tracks, like if you put a gun to my head and force me to hum the theme to Ocean Base, I'm pretty much gone, but they're usually few and far between. The team-up mechanic is interesting as well. Getting to choose who you pair up with is a lot of fun, and I really liked seeing what all the different combinations would do. But other than that, look, if I got a game over in your first level, you made a bad game. They got rid of a lot of movement options here. The insta-shield is gone, the air dash is gone, the homing attack is gone, the bounce move is gone, the backwards trick is gone, there's no boost mode or air tricks anymore unless you have Sonic on your team, the startup animation at the beginning of a stage is gone, even the little jump you can do at the end of rails in Advance 2 got removed here. I will never forgive them for this. Now, all of this may seem minor on the surface. I mean, how often did you really use the bounce move in Sonic Advance 2? But having multiple movement options is absolutely crucial for replayability. But don't worry, we'll compromise this by having different character abilities for each pair-up. New abilities such as Momentum Stopping Hammer Attack, Nerfed Flying Ability, Useless Throwing Attack, and my favorite, Vulnerable Jumping Move. Yeah, this is a fun concept on paper, but not when you realize they give you the only reasonable combination as your very first pair. The only positive thing I can say about the mechanics in this game is the rails. You can actually land on them anywhere you want now, instead of just at the start of it. But for every slight upgrade in this game, we get double the downgrades. Even the most basic of platforming is challenging in this game, because for the life of me, I can't get my character to not overshoot anything. It's hard to describe how it feels. It's kind of like constantly having speed shoes on your character, but only when jumping, because the acceleration on the ground is much slower than Advance 2 for no reason. Also, this is what speed shoes look like. What the fuck? It's very strange. It's like some shitty 2.5D Sonic fan game engine, except in 2D. It's even stranger when you consider they literally had the Advance 2 framework sitting right there. How can they even make changes to something when it already worked? And guys, just because you can get used to the controls doesn't mean they're ideal at all. Even if this game had the exact same level design as the second game, it still would have been worse, because there's simply less ways to traverse the stage. As for the level design, okay. This game goes back to the 3-act structure, and it just doesn't work. I think they're forgetting that the longer the amount of stage content, the less emphasis there is on remembering the level design, and therefore having fun replaying the stages. The level design is filled with boring gimmicks, too. The only gimmicks that were fine to interact with were ripped from Advance 2. Like, look at this one, where you have to stand still and jump on a button repeatedly. Like, no amount of fancy speedrunner gameplay can make this game look fun. There's a whole bunch of cheap hazards here, with spikes and enemies popping up like you were just supposed to know that they're there, and even if you remember where they are, they're not fun to avoid. Every zone is a Metropolis in this game. One thing I'll give the level design, though, is that they kind of turn it down a notch with the bottomless pits. Aside from Cybertrack, you won't find yourself randomly dropping to your doom that often. Usually you just land on the lower path. They're still here, though. Twinkle Snow was the only one I enjoyed here. It briefly revived my hope for this game until... Alright. It was the only zone that actually sort of reminded me of Advance 2, but even still, without any of the cool effects, the sense of speed just isn't there. It just feels more empty than Advance 2. Not to mention, there's still a bunch of slow platforming here. Like, did we really learn nothing from Spring Yard, Hydro City, and... well, basically the entirety of Sonic & Knuckles? The boss fights here are super lame as well. These are some of the easiest and most boring boss fights in the whole series. I think they may have gotten some criticism on them being too difficult in Advance 2 and then just said fuck it and gave up entirely. Often they're completely based on luck as well, even the final boss. He can punch you through the screen as well as grab you with his hands, which are two attacks that are really hard to dodge, but if you get a run where he never decides to perform them, well, it becomes pretty anticlimactic. So, are the review scores accurate? Well, definitely not for me, but since there are so many other people who really enjoy the game, I may just be missing something. Or I'm the only sane person on the internet. I just don't think this game has a lot of elements that are genuinely fun, and in the name of Reggie, if it's not fun, why bother? Ad revenue? But don't be scared to check out this game. I mean, I may not have enjoyed it, but that doesn't mean you can't, so go and check it out and see for yourself. But before you do that, you should probably watch more of my videos first. I mean, you already got started, so why stop now, right?